Send them by email to the email address. Is it Dan_Dewey?
Yes.
Right? Dan_Dewey, DEWEY at byu.edu, and he will be feeding questions to Madeline.
Would you leave those there?
I'll
Please
leave these
those
here
there in case somebody asks me a question and I've forgotten
And
the
they
answer.
referred to the book. Okay, all right. Time is yours.
Okay, do we want to, Dan, are you going to manage the questions?
Yes.
Okay. I'm happy to be here. I see familiar faces and some new faces, and it's always fun to come to BYU and meet new people because you're all great. I have a wonderful time with you. And so I'm here to do what I can. You may not get answers to your questions, but what I hope I'll do is maybe give you something to think about. Because some of the questions I've already seen that have been sent in print don't have answers. They have suggestions for where to start. Okay, Dan.
Okay. Well, let's see. So one of the first questions that you have in your list there, Madeline, is I have a student who's completely withdrawn and even misses lots of classes. How can I help this student?
Okay, this is where I come in and start saying I don't have an answer yet. I don't know enough. So I'm going to say this a lot. You start off by listening. You start off by asking open-ended questions. Open-ended questions are things like, so what happened? They generally start with what or how. They can start with why, though why can start, a why question can sound confrontational. So you might want to come up with something like, well, how is it that? But that kind of question leaves the person free to answer whatever they want, and so you try not to guide them too much. You try to leave it open for them, and you try to reflect what they're saying. Now, this is a skill that takes a lot of training, but if you can stay with what they're saying, even if you haven't been trained, then you're going to get them to open up more and stay interested in them as opposed to talking about what you're thinking. Don't jump in to give solutions too fast. It's a temptation. So when you get a student like this, particularly if they're withdrawn, they're going to be probably feeling pretty bent out of shape, and they're probably going to be feeling quite threatened by you if you're an authority figure, like a teacher. So what you want to do is be as open and natural with them as you can, and to really be concerned about, to show concern for them and how they're feeling. And then you'll get the information you need, because there are any number of reasons why a student may be feeling, may be withdrawing. You can say that you can describe it in general as an avoidance defense mechanism, but it isn't telling you what they're defending against. And that's what you need to know. Can some of the people around the table maybe come up, or even some of the people in the online audience, come up with some ideas on why a student might be withdrawing, missing classes? Why are they showing this avoidance defense mechanism?
Can we cut back to your anxiety eats cognition?
Yeah, but I wanted to get some. Yeah, I wanted to get some responses from the people in the audience, including the online ones, and they may come into Dan. But so, any thoughts on why somebody might be withdrawing? As I said, there are quite a few reasons, and it would kind of be a good idea to start thinking instead of coming down with an assumption about which reason it is. Stay open enough to know that there might be many, and try to find out what's happening. So what do you think? What might be a reason that somebody withdraws?
They could be feeling overwhelmed.
They could be feeling overwhelmed. What an assault on self-esteem when you're feeling overwhelmed. Okay, what else?
Personality.
Okay, their personality.
Very reserved, very shy. They're afraid to open up.
So you think they might be extremely introverted?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, it's possible. Okay, what else? What are some other possibilities? Yes.
Comparing yourself with other people in the environment, I think, is a big
Okay,
part.
so you start comparing yourself with others and feeling inadequate, and your self-esteem is taking a pretty hard hit, and you're going to start protecting yourself, even if it's non-dysfunctional. Okay, some other thoughts? Yeah.
It's funny because right before I came here, I received an email from a student who's on an internship in Brazil asking me if he can withdraw from one of his literature courses. And so I started asking these types of questions, but I think that one question is priority. And because he's working and studying at the same time, is work his first priority and studying his second? Is he working too many hours? That's being overwhelmed as well. But I think sometimes maybe certain priorities take
So what do you
over
think
for others.
what do you think you'll do now that you have him? You're hypothesizing that that he's got too much on his plate.
Well, I think what
So
I'm
what are you gonna do?
assuming or maybe happening is that his employer is working. We asked him to work the students no more than 20 hours a week. But oftentimes they'll work them like 40 hours a week, and the students get, they love the work, and so they get involved with it, and they forget about school because they're not in the classroom setting. So I'm starting to ask those types of questions. Like,
So what's your next step going to be?
How many hours are you working per week? And then we'll go from there and talk to
Or
the
even
employer.
how come you want to drop
exactly.
the class? Start off with that open-ended question. How come? Because how many hours are you working a week is a closed-ended question, and it doesn't give the student a chance to say something that you might not have assumed. Okay, so what you want to do is start off with something real open-ended. Well, how is it that you feel you need to drop the class?
And I left a part out. I did actually ask that question, and he said, "Oh, it's all the reading. I have way too much reading to do.
Okay.
It's a literature-based course." And so I thought,
Okay.
So we're
so you might then see, well, what would this reading? What would all that reading get in the way of? In other words, you can stay open-ended for a little while and see what comes out. Because sometimes people, if you stay open-ended long enough, sometimes people will come up with things that surprise both you and them. Okay?
So I have a couple of online responses.
Okay.
One person, I'm going to give you all four of his possibilities.
Okay,
You
good.
can address them, and I don't know if you want to offer some suggestions in these.
Well, all I'm looking for is possibilities. I'm trying to make the point that it's a mistake to make assumptions too soon.
So he says depends where they are. If abroad, it could be culture shock. Something may have happened in their personal or family life that's got them down. May be depressed for extraneous reasons. Difficulty at home, and then I guess lots more. But let's throw these in. He says.
Okay, well, I think those are all quite plausible. And they're all the kinds of things I've experienced with students. Everything you've mentioned is the kind of thing I've experienced with students at FSI. So when they're having trouble, it could be, and they're getting terribly anxious, and they're defending themselves against the anxiety or the assaults on self-esteem, which arouses anxiety. You want to start finding out, and what we've got are some great answers here to what could be going on. Okay. And I think maybe you're beginning to see why I can't answer that question directly, because the first thing to do is find out. But what about any other answers online, Dan?
No others yet.
Okay. Well, those are good. Why don't we move on then? But I think that makes the point that a lot of you can't always answer a question that says, "Well, my student is withdrawn. What would you do?" until you know why. And then another key, and this is going to come up probably again and again, is your relationship with the student. Okay? One of the things, there's some similarities between psychotherapy and teaching. And this book, Interpersonal Dynamics in Second Language Education, has a whole chapter on the subject. What we're talking about is that they both want to promote change, or they want to help the patient or the student. They want to help them change themselves, because a good teacher doesn't change you. A teacher helps you change yourself. Okay, and so does a good psychotherapist. And many of the things they do are similar, but one of the most important things is that personal relationship. In psychotherapy, they call it the therapeutic alliance. That's the relationship you have and the tacit, unspoken agreement between the therapist and the patient that you're going to work together on the project of helping you change in some way that you want to change because you're unhappy with the way things are. Teacher is, and I coined a term, actually I didn't coin the term, I borrowed it, but I used it in some articles, and that's the learning alliance, which is very much the same thing. The teacher and the student need to have a kind of an unspoken or even spoken agreement that they're working together, and the teacher and the student needs to feel that you're on their side. Make sense? Because And they really do need to feel that you're on their side. And once they feel that, it really makes a big difference. One of the some classic examples of some counseling we've done at FSI with students who had unbelievable test anxiety, because we have a very high stakes test at the end of training, was to help the students reframe their view of the testing teams as wanting them to succeed. And the testing teams do want them to succeed. They like seeing people do well. They have to see where they fail. They have to push them to their limits. But they really like. It's a pleasure to people, to our testers, to see people speaking their language well. So if you can help the student reframe the relationship to "I'm on your side," I'm here to see you succeed. That helps an awful lot. I like you. You may not like all of your students, but you can probably find something you like. I mean, I've had my failures, but they're not that many. Nobody's perfect.
So Madeline, I suspect a lot of these are going to come down to active listening, and I'm sure Madeline's going to say a lot more about that today. But I have just one question here that it may involve a little bit more than that, so I'll ask that question.
Okay.
How do we get learners to be more extrinsic in their motivation without hurting them? How do we get them to accept extrinsic rewards?
Now, this is somebody who do they in fact mean extrinsic, or do they mean intrinsic? Because most students come in.
They've all read the people who are asking this have all read the chapter that.
Okay, because it's unusual to have people. It's unusual to have people asking how to make somebody more extrinsic. Usually, most students come in with extrinsic motivation. That's a motivation for things that are outside of themselves.
And I guess the idea is getting them to accept those extrinsic rewards. In other words, if that doesn't motivate them, how can you get them to be more motivated? That's what I'm sort of hearing them say.
Well, I guess one of the first things I'd do is find out what they want. I mean, if they're not getting anything they want, then nothing's rewarding them. In general, we in the teaching field tend to think that intrinsic motivation is better. That's the desire to do things because they make you happy, they make you feel you're a better person, that they're fun or whatever. But not everybody comes in, for example, thinking language learning is fun. They come into the Foreign Service, they're sent to a post, say they're going to Afghanistan, which is a very difficult post, and they have to learn Arabic. They didn't necessarily want to go to Afghanistan in the first place, but they need to do it for their career because they can't say no, Foreign Service officer. And so they're taking Arabic, but they're not real enthusiastic about it. So you don't see a lot of intrinsic motivation there. So they do have extrinsic motivation, which is they need it for their career. And they need it. They need to get enough of a score on that test so they don't have to ask for a waiver and be shamed and whatnot. And so they can go and meet the assignment. There's a lot of pressure on them, and also so they can get those nice bonuses that they get. So that's extrinsic motivation. I would say as a teacher, I'd be more concerned about getting that kind of person to find the fun in it, and that would a lot of that is personal relationship. But to make people more extrinsic, I'm just baffled. I'm just having trouble even thinking of a situation where somebody would want to have people more extrinsic if they're already intrinsically motivated.
I was going to say maybe you can comment more on intrinsic motivation because I don't know about other people, but to me that's a difficult one as well. Extrinsic motivation. You have a lot of people who are doing it, as you said, for instrumental purposes. But,
right.
But what about intrinsic motivation? Have you found things that are useful or helpful there?
But for trying to get people to have more, again, the relationship's a key. One of the when I was talking about the relationship between therapy or the similarity between therapy and teaching, in both cases, the teacher or the therapist, the practitioner, is the instrument, their own best instrument. They're not doing anything. They're not using tools. They don't have scalpels. They don't have they don't necessarily do it with a good teacher can do it without a whiteboard or anything, or a computer or anything. So a lot of it is that you're using yourself, and so getting intrinsic motivation. One of the places you start is the relationship between you and the students, because if they like you, they're going to start liking your language. We had students who came in to the Foreign Service Institute when I first started. And that was quite a while ago, as you know. And they were special forces students, sent by the military to get languages that they didn't teach at the Defense Language Institute. And I was in charge of Cambodian at the time. And so we get these kids in who were about 18 years old and weren't particularly well educated. They were high school graduates, not necessarily all from the best high schools. And they'd come in, and they were really mostly interested in girls and drinking. And our Cambodian teacher was really quite a well-educated fellow. And there were two things we did. One of them was that they ended up learning Cambodian because he was such a nice guy, and they really liked him. He was a wonderful teacher, but part of the reason he was a wonderful teacher was because he established such a good relationship with these kids. The other one was we told them every day, since they had nothing else to talk about, they had to read the newspaper and find one article to comment on. So they'd start getting some topics. Didn't have to be the deepest politics. It just had to be something in the newspaper other than women and drinking. So, because if you don't have concepts, you can't talk. You don't have anything to talk about. But a lot of it was his relationship. So that, I think, is a real key to intrinsic motivation. Another one is finding things that food is always a good one. People love to eat. And you can get into things, for instance, Arabic culture, there's a wonderful history and beauty in a lot of the art. So there are things that you can find that the person may relate to. They might be interested, if you, again, we're going to get back to active listening. If you explore their interests, what are they interested in? Maybe you can find a parallel in the culture that they're learning. Yeah, Dylan.
Just a question about study abroad specifically. I find that most of the students, when they first arrive, are excited. They love the language. They think it's so cool that they're there and learning it. But at some point, a couple of months or more down the road, culture shock hits. Yeah. And I've had several students come to me and saying, I'm just not interested in Arabs anymore. I don't really think I want to be here. I'm not interested in going on with this. And you kind of feel like it's a stage, but what kind of help can you give a student like that?
They've just gotten beaten down by a lot of bad experiences because they have experiences with rejection, with anti-Americanism. The women, we know the kinds of things that happen to the women, the pressures on the women students. And so, yeah, they can come in with exaggerated expectations. And I think when I was out there a year ago, we found that people did have exaggerated expectations. And so the exaggerated expectations may lead to a lot of enthusiasm without realism. And so, yeah, people, and some of it is, okay, I'm really fed up. How about taking, how about a sabbatical, a 2 or 3 day sabbatical away from Arabs? Go do something fun where you're not under pressure, and see if you can't recover some of your resilience. I mean, there are lots of things you can do if you don't expect people to be having their noses to the grindstone all the time. I'm a firm believer in downtime.
Yeah, maybe you could talk just a little bit more about that in terms of like how you deal with this sort of thing with individuals in helping them to recognize what's happening. We've been talking about that a little bit, that just seeing, somebody maybe we talked about this yesterday, right? About how about the anger that you feel, the frustration is nameless.
Until you help until you name it.
So getting to the metacognitive, sort of building the metacognitive ability to recognize.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, mass active listening does a lot of that. Somebody's all angry and frustrated and isn't able to give it a name, and they'll talk about all the things that's kind of talk around it. And if you just say, you're really pissed off, you're really angry, it can be very liberating. It's not something people find easy to do because you're really having to confront feelings. And most of us don't feel real comfortable about talking about people's strong feelings. And so it's one of the things that if you're trained to do it, it's incredibly useful. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, and I think this would be a good point to talk about the fight or flight sort of thing, the anxiety.
Well, we did talk about avoidance with this initial case.
Right. You talked about avoidance, but have you talked specifically about the effect of anxiety on cognition?
Well, okay, fight or flight, it comes out of a different model, but we can talk about it is a form of a defense against anxiety. People deal with anxiety in a lot of different ways. We all have it. We all have defense mechanisms. The real question is, are they getting in our way? Now we're talking about a student, for example, a student here who's getting withdrawn, for whom it's getting in her way or his way. I think was it she or he? Doesn't specify. Okay, so this student is the anxiety and the way the student is responding to it is getting in the way. It's dysfunctional. Okay, and that's when it becomes an issue. Now, some people, this student is using avoidance. Others may use aggression. That's the fight or flight. Fight would be aggression. So, what kind of forms of aggression, defensive aggression, can some of you think of, including the online audience? What can you think of in the classroom that's a form of aggression?
Bad mouth.
Bad mouthing, okay.
And the curriculum. And
Okay,
the
bad
textbook.
mouthing.
Yeah.
Bad mouthing the program, bad mouthing the teachers. What else?
Just giving up.
That what I would call avoidance. How about, I'm looking for aggression at this point. Fight as opposed to flight.
Combative with other students, or
Combative with other
not
students.
interacting well with other students.
That could be, yeah, you could be, the term that's often used for this is displacement, where you're taking, you're not aiming at the thing that's really the problem, you're displacing it onto something else. Same thing for this. This is what you mentioned with the blaming and the scapegoating as a form of displacement. Very common defense mechanism. Okay, some other aggressive things people might do. Yeah.
I just had a question for you. So if you recognize that displacement in learners, is active listening the best way to help them identify that themselves, or is it appropriate to tell them, I see you doing this?
I might start with a confrontation, because then I would give me a reason to start listening.
So how do you do
It would
that?
depend on the circumstances, but one possibility might be, as you say, well, I've noticed that you're doing such and such. Can you tell me what's going on? You know. But I might start that kind of thing with a mild confrontation, because it gives the rationale for the interaction. Okay. Some other aggressive things that people do.
Vandalizing the classroom.
Hmm?
Vandalizing the classroom.
Vandalizing the classroom. Well,
See,
that's definitely aggressive. Any others? Yeah.
I don't know if this is one or not, but kind of rebelling against the curriculum, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, especially on study abroad types of programs, oftentimes you'll find a student that clings to what they feel most comfortable with. And then part of this is culture shock, I think, but it's their identity, it's them, and maybe really going against what the language and the culture, the local culture, and things like that. And I know that comes at different stages, but sometimes students will cling to what they feel most comfortable.
It can be now. Again, I'm not trying to call that aggressive, unless I dissing the.
Yeah, and that's what I mean by
the
dissing the
program.
people, the culture, the language, whatever it may
But
be.
it could also be simply that they learn in a different way from your program, and that's something I would hope you would keep open to. That some people simply don't learn the same way as your program does. Maybe it's a good program for most people, but some people may need to learn in a different way. But yes, but sometimes it can be a defensive thing, and certainly that clinging to something familiar is actually an avoidance type of defense, as well as the bad mouthing. Okay, some others. What have you seen in the way of student behavior in the classroom? Things they do in the classroom during class. Or as students, what have you seen other students do? You would never do these things, of course. Yeah.
It's kind of this excessive talking.
Excessive talking. Yeah.
They just chat incessantly.
Taking a lot of airspace so that no work can get done.
Right.
Facebook and social media on their computers while you're lecturing.
I would call that avoidance. Yeah. And maybe they're multitasking. Some people can.
Yeah.
That's another thing to keep open to.
Especially this generation.
I think there's a couple of ways of resisting.
Uh-huh.
And one is kind of overt. When you ask them to do something in class, they just more or less refuse, or they do it in a way that kind of subverts what you're trying to do. But I think a lot of students subvert what you're trying to do. They take a homework assignment and they do it, but they do it with a grudge that somehow or other makes it useless and busy work instead of and I consider that a kind of aggression.
It's in a way it's avoidance and aggression.
Yeah.
It's avoidance, but it's also angry.
Yeah.
It's very interesting that one of the things that I think of a lot is a student who's constantly making jokes. It's kind of related to the one you mentioned, but students people laugh and they think it's funny and it's very entertaining, but it does prevent work from getting done. Or the student who insists on having every single point analyzed.
We never have any of those. So.
And I can understand their desire to analyze, but if it's taking up everybody else's class time, you need to find that becomes a classroom management issue. So I mean, again, there are lots of aggressive things as well as avoidance things that people do. I'm sure as teachers you do some of them too. If you have a classroom or a student that you find difficult, you nod knowledgeable. What do you do? Tell us what some of the things you do as a teacher.
Sometimes, I got so mad when learning is for grades, and I really have a problem with the system that reinforces the fact that we are here because your life is driven by these grades. And then I feel like we learn for life. We learn for the sake of learning is a kind of thing that only in books. So when the kids start talking about, my students start talking about, the grades and how it's going to work, and I feel like sometimes, you know what, I'll have the exam ready for you, and it is in a very threatening way. Like you better study well. And it's not for grades, because we have to have this compromise. We know we're learning something, and about the language, it's not algebra, it's not science. It's building up, it's vocab, it's structure, sentences. You have to. So it's this fine line I have to walk when it comes to.
You get frustrated when they don't seem to have the intrinsic motivation you feel that they need to have.
Yeah, sometimes, because I feel, okay, what's wrong with me?
And so then you get angry, and you say something that's kind of mean, like, "I'll have this exam for you."
Yeah, sometimes yes.
And so you do a little bit of aggression there.
Yes.
To deal with your angry feelings.
Truly.
Yeah. Okay. So there's some defensive behavior of an aggressive sort. Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
Okay. Kirk looks as if he wants to say something. Oh, okay.
I definitely want to make sure that we touch on this matter of that.
I'm coming to that. I'll come to it. I'm going to work up to it. But,
all right. I'll let you do it.
Okay. Let's find it. Okay. So part of what we keep touching on anxiety. Kirk wants me to talk about something here. So, I'm going to. He wants me to come up with my aphorism here that I came up with, but the last time I was here. We keep touching on anxiety, and anxiety is really at the root of a lot of the things we're talking about. Your anxiety about not being a good teacher and having people learn, a student's anxiety about not being good enough, or anxiety about disappointing somebody, or whatever. The anxiety about maintaining your self-esteem. A lot of this comes down to anxiety. Anxiety is a very uncomfortable feeling, and it's also very destructive. And part of the reason we're emphasizing it is that it really gets in the way of people's learning. When you find a student who's really anxious, you're probably going to find that their cognitive energy is seriously impacted. That they or if you find a student who's really slipping, and their work isn't going very well, there are going to be a number of things. But one of the things that you look for is, are they anxious? The chances are you'll know it already. But if you don't, it's one of those things to listen for and to look for. Because this is the little aphorism I came up with when we were talking about the importance of anxiety and dealing with it, is I said anxiety eats cognition. Okay? You have X amount of cognition, and if you've got a lot of anxiety, you can see the hole being burrowed in it. So that's why anxiety is so important. Because people aren't working on all their cylinders, if they're having to put their energy into managing a lot of anxiety. All of us feel some anxiety most of the time, or at least some of the time, but we don't have. It's usually not debilitating. It's not crippling. Yeah.
Like sometimes I get I have anxiety, but it is mild. It is really, it keeps me going, put more motivation and more work on this is because I have this is so I need to increase my standards and hours, and so sometimes it is good to have this small part of anxiety to keep you going on, not this much. It is becomes like a disease or something. It is maladaptive with the situation.
This is what we call facilitating anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
And facilitating anxiety is that small amount of anxiety, not too much, that gets you moving, as you said.
Mm-hmm.
I use facilitating anxiety to get myself to write because I'm lazy. But if it gets to be too much, if there's not enough, you don't do anything. If there's too much, your capacities are eroded. So it's got to be just the right amount, and it's usually not too much. It's not very much. As you said, it's just a little bit of anxiety.
Can students manage their own anxiety? I mean,
can students manage their own anxiety? Well, they can learn to.
How does one help them do that?
Well, the first thing is to become aware of it. Some students are anxious and aren't aware of how anxious they are. They're doing things like these defense mechanisms, and they're displacing. And so a lot of it is having them acknowledge that this is their issue, not the program's issue, for example. And it has to be done gently and kindly, but that's where managing anxiety starts, is knowing you have it.
So one of the things that I can't remember where I read it, whether it was something in yours or Dornier's or someone else's, but we're talking about helping learners identify and cope with anxiety. It's just helping them identify some of those specific stressors or signals or things that they're experiencing. Can you think of a list of things that you would help students think of or identify?
Well, I think I'd ask them. I would ask them. Well, what do you do when you're feeling edgy? What do you do when you're afraid of something? What do you do when you have an exam coming? I'd start getting their list of the things they do. I might also give some observations if I've seen some or heard of some. But I wouldn't necessarily. But I'd be more interested in having them come up with their own list.
So what if a person just says, for example, I shut down, we have all these tests all the time, and I'm having to do that, and then I go outside of class, and I have to interact with people, and I don't know what they're saying, and it's just stressful for me, and so I just find myself shutting down and feeling like I can't study or something like that. What sorts of suggestions would you give them to?
I think I'd want to explore the shutting down more. I wouldn't want to start with suggestions. See, you guys want to get into helping right away, and I understand that. But you help better you really help much better if you can pinpoint what's going on.
So what if they say they just feel like sleeping all the time, or feel like they just can't do anything and don't have motivation to study? Or
okay, what happens when you think about studying?
Just feel more anxious.
Oh, okay. So you just start feeling anxious. Well, that's interesting. Okay, so it makes you feel you're really uncomfortable when you start thinking about studying.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. And so how do you feel about this? I mean, do you feel this is a good thing? Are you happy with it?
Definitely not.
How happy are you with this?
Do?
Okay, well, we've already started. What do you do? We know that you're anxious. Normally, when you're anxious and you're not under as much pressure, what do you do when you feel anxious? Suppose you're anxious. Suppose you were in college and you had a test and you were anxious about it. What did you do?
Same sort of thing, but it wasn't as overwhelming because people around me understood what I was saying and I understood them.
So part of this is that you're getting anxious because you're feeling isolated and out of communication.
Yeah, right, and just overwhelmed by it.
And overwhelmed. So much going on. You just.
And I would like to insert here that a lot of the time the case this I just keep thinking back on Valerie Aveni Pellegrino's study of looking at the Russian study abroad students and how universal it was that they were dealing with identity issues and feeling stupid, right? Not liking that. I'm sick of feeling stupid. I'm sick of not being able to express myself, and withdrawing to say, that's not me. I am not stupid. And all these people think I'm stupid, or I feel like they're thinking I'm stupid.
Yeah, and so
lack of confidence. I mean, if you're not doing well outside of the classroom, and then it's a struggle to keep up in the classroom. And
so this sounds like something where you start thinking about doable tasks. things that people can build some success into. Chunking the projects down. If the person, and that's the place where, again, I might have the students start thinking, well, what is something we could think about that isn't so big and overwhelming and humongous that you might just start with? Something you think you might be able to do. You know, maybe some kind of topic that you might just go out and try that would be pretty easy.
So building some confidence by having them find something accomplishable.
Yeah, building success. Building success builds confidence. But you start off, I mean, so once, you know, but that, I thank you for role playing there, because that was an example of the kind of inquiry I'd start making, is to find out something more. And it may be the same answer from a lot of people all the time, but it isn't always going to be.
So in terms of building metacognitive skill, right, people being able to recognize and step back and look at their negative thinking and so forth, what kinds of things do you do with, it's wonderful to be able to sit down with an individual,
right?
But our study abroad program is looking at 50 plus individuals. Now you have helped us train coaches and so forth, and we do interviews and so forth. This is great, but you'd like to be able to do some group work, like you were just talking about, making lists of how do you feel about anxiety, and we've done the study abroad orientation and help people. I mean, sort of tell them ahead of time, this is what's going to happen. You're going to find these feelings, and then later on, the feelings are going to come, and we're going to talk about.
Well, we did some of this last year,
right? But I'm just wondering, from your experience, if you have any more suggestions about group sorts of training to help people in developing this metacognitive. A lot of these things are things that people do not want to admit to. They don't want to admit to being weak.
And they
I don't get anxious. I don't get whatever, right?
And they definitely don't want to do it in public,
right?
In a group, which is why you've got to make the group very safe. Or you've got to make the group a stimulus for them to come and talk later. Because a lot of people, unless the group has a lot of trust and cohesion with each other, they're probably not going to expose. It's going to be very rare that people will expose the kinds of things that they need to expose to be able to talk, to be able to work them through. So I would say a group is more of a way of having people become aware, and not a way of working something through. Yeah, aware of possibilities.
To add to this, how do you help the individual student who is experiencing anxiety that is affecting the whole group understand that it's affecting the whole group, or they're affecting you?
I'd probably tell them. Again, there's a place for some confrontation, but then after you confront, you're going to want to do a lot of listening, because they're not going to be able to stop the anxiety unless they can recognize it, and they can recognize what they're doing about it, and then you can help them try to find a different way to manage it. But so I might start there with a very gentle confrontation, observation, very neutrally phrased, and then you go into your listening again and find out what's going on with them. Because again, you need to be on their side. You're not when you're talking with them, you need not to be on the side of the other students. Then they're just going to shut down. You need to be on the students. You need to come across as on the student side. It's good. These are great questions. I really like them.
Can I ask a somewhat related question? From the article and from several of the things you've said, it seems like, teacher being in charge and having a set program that's inflexible is bad, and individualizing, what the student is doing and what they're capable of doing is good. You can't help but agree with that. But when you have a study abroad program with 50 students and 1 or 2 directors,
right?
And all of a sudden you've got 25 students with different learning styles and different needs, and they don't like the way the program is working. It's pretty much impossible to have 25 different programs.
Of course it is.
So how do you manage to have the student feel like their learning style is being accommodated when you really actually can't have 25 separate programs, when you can't be thinking of doable tasks every day for 25 different students?
But what we found again at FSI is that most students will adapt to a set program. If you work with them to think about how they can adapt that program for themselves, and for example, if you've got readings, well, what kind of things do you want to read about? What are some, or maybe find some ways to build some little bit of flexibility into the program. Have people choose topics. Have people maybe have an hour every week or every day, or however often you want to do it, when they have a project that they're working on. So you can still have a set program. People can accept it if they can also feel that they have a little bit of wiggle room. One of the things we work with our students is not to say we're going to have every teacher accommodate to every student's learning style, because we can't. What we do is we tell the students that part of what you need to do is take responsibility for making the adaptations for yourself.
Amen.
And again, that's part of the metacognitive development that we're aiming for in our students. Metacognitive, for those who aren't familiar with the term, cognition is thinking, metacognition is thinking about thinking.
It seems to me, too, that what Adele said about that sort of intrinsic motivation, getting students to be less motivated by grades and more motivated by learning can also make a difference, too, where, if they are studying things that they're highly interested in, that makes a difference, or if there is some adaptation that allows them to work on things that are of personal interest,
that's right.
Might make some difference.
I think that makes a big difference. It really helps.
And what you said yesterday about the relationship, why don't you mention that about what you found with FSI and the teachers in terms of the connection that people are feeling with their teachers is a huge factor in motivating them.
Oh, absolutely. I think I did say something. You may have been out of the room when I said it. Yeah. Didn't I? I think I did. Yeah. I talked about the learning and therapeutic alliances and whatnot. Yeah. As a matter of fact, I wrote a little article on the Learning Alliance, and I started it off with some quotes from end of training questionnaires from our students that illustrated the importance of that relationship. It was the students talking about far more than just the competence of the teacher the technical competence of the teacher. Okay. So where are we? Oh, Dill's question about learning styles. Yeah, and so I believe very much in individualizing where you can, but I also recognize that in a regular program, and FSI is a regular program, you can't, like yours, you can't have 25 or 150 or different programs. What you can have is some minor adaptations and then some work with students on metacognition, on their managing themselves. Metacognition is self-regulation, and the educational psychology field is real big on that. Self-regulation is really, I think, the key to effective learning. It's certainly the key to continuing to learn when you don't have a teacher to hold your hand. So a lot of what we're trying to do over with our learning consultation service is help the students develop better metacognitive skills. And make more decisions for themselves, make more effective ones. Now, once again, a program like yours still is not aiming at that. But where you can, if your coaches and whatnot can help people with that, all the better. Because that gives people something, it's much better than giving somebody a fish. You're teaching them to fish. You give somebody a fish, you feed them for a day, you teach them to fish, and you feed them for life. So that's kind of where we're coming from. And that's why I'm interested in all the self-knowledge stuff. That's why I'm interested in working with students on learning styles. Because if they know about themselves, they know where they're going to, what the pitfalls are. They know where their strengths are. They know what to work around and how to work around it. They come into a program like yours that is it's a wonderful program. I'd kill to be in it. But and there's some things that may not fit for them. Instead of going and bad-mouthing the program, they find ways to adapt to it, or they find ways to negotiate something that keeps your program intact but also gets some of their needs met, instead of making it all or nothing. So, does that answer your question?
Yeah. Can I ask another question?
Sure. We have another hand over
Oh,
here.
okay.
How do you feel about students who do not come to class and be disruptive, put in SSI, which is kind of like isolate them from the entire student body and put them in a place where it's like simulating a prison in a way, like okay, you can't go anywhere, you can't do anything, you're sitting here in front of a counselor or in front of someone who's going to watch you for a long time, kind of as a punishment, so you can think about what you did and recuperate.
Well, how effective do you think that's going to be?
I personally don't think it's effective. I'm asking your opinion.
Well, I don't think it's effective either.
But the counselors in the schools love
Well, that's the counselors in the school, and I don't agree with them. How about that? But this is where you get into the active listening, where you get into trying to find something instructive for them. It is frustrating. It's very frustrating to have these kids who act out. But it's but sticking but putting them in isolation, but putting them in a timeout is all it's going to do is make them angrier.
Well, it's kind of put them in a place where they're watched all the time. They have to do all the homeworks all the time, kind of forcing them in a way. I personally don't think you can force anyone to learn, but that's the idea.
Let us hope that most of us won't run into that kind of situation.
We do that. We run into this all the time if we're teaching in a public school where students are put into our classes against their will, right? So in public school settings, this is a disaster. We have and that's another matter. Right? Probably something. This particular webinar is more tuned to people who have chosen to be there, although we still see a lot of acting out.
So,
I just want to ask about a specific kind of acting out that has really bothered me, and I don't know if it bothers me because of my personality or what, but I have every time I do a study abroad, which is unfortunately a lot, I get one or two students who are very passive-aggressive, who are overtly very, very compliant, but who just manage to, to subvert everything, make every other student angry. The one I had last time when he felt like the class was getting boring, he'd get up and leave. And he would get up and leave 3 or 4 times a week from every teacher, and the teachers would just be enraged. But that was his way of communicating to them that
they didn't matter.
You're stupid. You're not doing a good class today, so I'm leaving. This is a waste of my time. And I don't know whether I was very uncomfortable doing either mild or unmild confrontations. Is that still what you would suggest when you see a kind of a negative behavior like that?
Yeah, I think I would. I would say, I understand that you're kind of walking out of class and several times a week, and it's very upsetting to other people. What's going on? Again, then see what he'll tell you, and see if you can work with him eventually to find a more constructive way of dealing with his frustration, which it probably is, and his anxiety.
I've heard Madeline say several times that if you're on the side of the student, if you're careful not to take sides too much, I'm taking the sides of the teacher. I'm here to defend the teacher, right? Yeah. If you're on the side of the student and you honestly want to listen and to find out what's going on, that you'll be much more successful than if you take the side of the teachers and say, hey, I'm here to defend the teachers. You're leaving their classes. What's up? There's a very different position there than if you say, I understand you've been standing up and leaving. Can you tell me what's wrong? Or that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think that's a very an important point. Is that again, you want to be on the side of the student. They'll open up if they think you're there just to as a trial court and judge. You're going to find people closed down. People hate being judged.
So, yeah, that actually relates to a question that someone sent in that says some students don't seem to be able to accept the way we do things in the classroom here. They get upset at some of our practices. How can we deal with their American expectations and help them adjust to our cultural classroom ways? So any thoughts on that, Madeline?
I guess it would depend on which cultural classroom ways we're talking about, wouldn't it?
I don't know. Maybe some of you have more experience and can give some ideas.
This is the kind of thing we get every year when we go to Jordan or Egypt.
Okay.
The students immediately dislike, they just feel like, I can't learn with the Jordanian way. I'm used to learning the American way. And it's hard to put your finger on exactly what they mean by the Jordanian way. It's something about the way teachers are treating them and that they're expected to behave or something.
I think we need to step back a little bit because I can see a high level of anxiety about teaching abroad. I mean, if we see the common ground between our comments, we'll find that very true. And I feel like it's not a surprise. We have time before we leave. And we know what kind of students we have. And we need to lecture those students very well beforehand. Try to ask those who had the experience before to share their experiences with us. So I think there must be at least no surprises for us, for someone who will leave the class, for example, since the teacher didn't do a good job, or someone will be passive aggressive, as Dale said, we need to tackle these points before we leave, because we invested the money and the people and the teachers. So I think we need to do more work, in my point of view, in terms of the
preparation of the students.
The preparations of the students.
So one of the things that I've heard that even just preparing students for perhaps is that sometimes if teachers hand back work in the order of performance, for example, who got the best grade, and praise performance or something as they pass homework back, and we're not accustomed to that in the U.S. So I guess what I hear you saying is that if we familiarize them with these things
exactly,
in advance, they're anticipating this, and it might not be quite as offensive. But even then, it could be offensive to a student, even if they're familiar with it in advance. So.
Yeah, but then once they're aware of it, then they at least they can start again using their metacognition to try to think of ways to cope with their feelings about it.
Yeah.
So those feelings don't eat their cognition.
It says here, how do you deal with their American expectations and help them to adjust to our classroom ways? I mean, do you think that you can really get them to adjust to the classroom ways? I would need more specifics. It depends. I mean, if it's something like handing out papers in order of performance, you probably could. You can help people anticipate it, as you say, So what if they're always at the bottom? They're always the last person, and they're always. They're going
to feel lousy, and they're going to feel lousy, and then what you need to do is help them manage those feelings. But you can't get them to change. The teacher's not going to change.
So how do you help them to manage those feelings? Is it a matter of sitting down and talking with them?
How do you deal with any student whose feelings are failing? I mean, that isn't going to be the only signal that they're doing badly.
Let's add here, for those who are sending in questions, it would help a great deal if you send in more context to your question.
Absolutely.
You illustrate it with specifics.
Yeah, because I can't give a general answer to that general question. I can say that there are going to be some things that you can prepare people for, and there may be some things you can't. But probably the best thing you can be doing is help people understand from the teacher's point of view what they're doing. Some empathy with the teacher. Because a lot of the conflict comes from people thinking entirely from their own point of view, as opposed to thinking, well, where might the teacher be coming from? The thing with the handing back the papers is probably training. The teacher's trained to do that. Go ahead. You look as if you want to say
I can give some context, because I didn't have teachers that did that, but I had teachers who, and I think Arabs in general are very overt about how you are. Mothers tell their daughters, you're the pretty one and you're the less pretty one. It's just that's Arab culture. And so in classrooms, they tend to tell the good students, you're really good, and they tend to tell the bad students, you're not really very good. And I think most students do kind of end up accepting it, but the last time I was in Jordan, one student would come out of class in tears. This is a former Marine with a neck that big. But he would literally come out of class in tears. And I didn't know how to deal with it. We talked to the teacher 3 times. She promised not to do it, but it wasn't that she was trained to do it. It's that she was an Arab. That's how.
Yeah. Okay.
And so then I tried to work with the student, but in the end, I just didn't have I couldn't figure out anything to do except take him out of class. Maybe if I'd been trained as
this one, I'm going to defer to our native Arab teacher here.
Yes.
Who can probably speak from both cultures.
Yes, sure.
Because you're familiar with both.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, I never use the word all or Americans or Arabs. I never do that. I don't allow my students to use the word all in any article or any essay. We always have different approaches, and there is definitely some sort of cultural differences that we have to. Again, prevention is better than cure. That al-wiqaya khayrun min al-ilaj. So I have to know who's going there. We have a set of goals. We have expectations, and for me, I definitely get my goals for my curriculum from my students. They have to. What are your goals? Mm-hmm. What do you need to achieve? Uh-huh. So, and I craft my stuff based on that. The culture problem with some people, I think we face that a lot. Some teachers, they don't know enough about the American culture, and sometimes there is it's even the way you're moving. We use from right to left, right, from our culture, and when we can see that when we have a buffet or something, all the American people getting from left to right, and all the Arab people got to go from. There is something that it's not. We talking is the key. I mean, we have to sit with the teacher, and I had that in my school with some American students and an Arabic, an Egyptian teacher, and we talked to the teacher, and he was able to, get experience enough to work with these things. You don't say that you're excellent. What a wonderful job. You see? No, we don't do that.
So part of it's teacher training.
It's teacher training, yes. Yeah.
As well as helping students prepare themselves for the difference. Okay, so I'll come to you in just a second. On the teacher training, part of what was going on with this Marine is that he didn't feel he was valued for anything. He was just getting beaten on the head for the entire hour. And it would be nice, again, as a part of teacher training, to help teachers understand that particularly with adults, and I include the students in your overseas programs as adults, that they do need to feel that they have some value, even if it's not just for, even if it's not academic performance. It might be because they're a really nice guy. It might be because they really contribute some good feelings in the class. But they're not entirely a machine that outputs performance. Sorry, who wants to say something?
I have a comment about what he said, and this is really interesting because I came from Jordan, and I taught for 3 years in Jordan, and I always hear about American education system. It is one of the best education system in the world, and I didn't know what that means really till I came and I started to teach here. And when I came to the school and I said, wow, what's this? This is not a school. This is hotel. It is 5 stars. And it is, it is like, comparative with like Jordan or Syria or most of Arabic countries, for the buildings, I said, this is amazing, air conditioning and carpet and this is not the issue. It's the building. It is at the end. It is facilitating the education, but this is not the end. The end is the experience, how to teach these students. And I came from Jordan, as he said, some teachers, they said, oh, you are donkey, you are stupid. Not just they insult the students, they're in bad way. And I came here, and it is how the students, they go to learn from Arabic countries. As a teacher from Jordan, I need to put all what I have learned, or most of my techniques and the way I teach and the methods, and I need to put it away. Otherwise, I will, I said, oh, I can teach, or the school will fire me. So I think it is the same things, and that's true. I think it is challenging not just for the students who go. There's a challenge for me as a teacher. If I don't change the way I do it in Jordan, and if the students from America to go, because it is really difference when we talk about education between America and Arabic countries. It is a huge difference, even in modern Jordanian schools, and similar in the buildings and the equipments and the technology, but still the way how we deal with the students, how we deal with the parent, as the outcomes we need in this process of education, and what we need from the process of the outcome in Arabic countries, it is totally different. So I think this is totally true, and it is still challenging for teachers who come from abroad of America in living, as with Americans, or in teaching American students.
No, I don't think there are going to be any easy answers to this. I think there are compromises and adaptations that are probably going to have to be made on both sides.
And let me just insert here. We don't want to beat up on Jordan or Egypt or anyone. We have some.
It can happen in any. It can happen with any pair of countries.
That's right.
Yeah.
We have some pretty lousy teaching going on here. Some great teaching going on in Jordan. So
and that's one of the points that a couple of email messages or responses have made is that it's a highly complex issue that needs a very nuanced approach.
Mm-hmm.
In the words of one response here, and the orientation is really important. Preparing students in advance, ongoing orientation also throughout the program, and just working with the students on a regular basis. So.
Yeah, so I agree completely. It is very complex and nuanced, and no easy answers. And some of it's going to be dealing with the individuals concerned and what their issues are.
Now, one of the things that I wrote about this in one of my director's reports. It's on our website, and actually summarized a good part of the Georgetown study of Vandenberg et al. That published here last year. One of the things they talk about, and Jerry just mentioned here in his comment, was about the orientation, but also this was statistically significant findings in terms of language progress. The better your orientation, the better your in-country coaching, the more likely you were to have both significantly better linguistic and culture gains. And that's one of the things that we're trying to do, is to work on the providing coaches and to provide online resources that provide not every student's going to have the benefit of having coaches that have been well trained and understand how to reflectively listen and draw it out of students and so forth. So some comments that you might offer on the front of how students can sort of help themselves to become more capable at handling these situations, because many students are not going to have the benefit of a good listening coach.
I don't know. I mean, I'd have to think about that one. Off the top of my head, I haven't thought about that much before, but because I generally am used to working with people, or finding ways for people to work one-on-one, or a couple of people on one, but to work with the listening techniques and whatnot.
One thing I would think was just reading the chapter that we just assigned would be an enormously valuable thing. I'm thinking we just had our intensive high school program start here, our Star Talk program, and I'm thinking this weekend I want to suggest to these kids, this would be a really useful thing for you to read over the weekend to understand what's going on.
It might be. Then you might want something that they do with it.
Right.
Does any of this sound familiar? What are some examples you can think of from your own experience for X, Y, and Z? There are questions at the end of at the end of each chapter, and I think some of those questions might be useful. And then process them. Don't just have them answer them. Maybe have some time to talk about them together. This was chapter 7, I believe.
Right.
Yeah, I have some. It's called practice.
161.
It's called practice. When you've learned foreign languages or other subjects of importance to you, what has been your motivation been? So there's some exercises right here that they can do. But again, I would recommend a chance not just to write them down, because that may be done very superficially.
So in terms of processing, what has been your experience with, one of the things a student could do on this sort of thing is to do some journaling, where they actually try to express what's going on, even if it's just for themselves, no one to see.
Once again, journaling is one of those things that I think people find is just an extra thing they have to do unless there's some kind of feedback or some kind of response. I think the dialogue journaling tends to be more effective because just telling people to journal, unless they're the kinds of people who tend to be self-reflective anyway, is just going to feel like more of a burden for people who are already feeling overburdened. For people who actually do that kind of thing, it can be very helpful. It's like meditation. I think meditation works real well for some people, but it isn't the answer for everybody. Journaling works well for other people. It isn't the answer for everybody. So it might be better to have a kind of a list of things that people could do for themselves, but also have some interactive questions. These are probably phrased more for the teacher, so you'd encourage the student to say, to substitute teacher with themselves. What have you observed in your students? Well, what have you observed in yourself? But coming back to the interactive thing on the internet, again, you might have some questions. You might say, have a heading like, when you just feel that you can't take one more straw, and then have some things that they can respond to, question and answer. I don't know. I mean, but that's stuff that we might want to go around the table if we had more time. Because I bet we'd have some good ideas around the table, and over here in the chairs too. this is the kind of thing that I'd want a group to work with. Come up with a lot of ideas, brainstorm it. I think it's a useful, it's a good question. Any other questions that you'd like to bring up?
I have one question that occurred to me that as you were speaking. So a lot of the research on learning during study abroad shows, for example, that in fact Rob Martinson, who's here, and the Georgetown study that was mentioned, if you look at intercultural competence, it indicates or suggests that those that immerse themselves so much that they don't
come up for air.
They don't come up for air. That those students don't develop as much in terms of intercultural competence as people who actually come up for air. And on the other hand, if you have students who spend all their time with their L1, their first language peers speaking English in most cases, those students don't develop much. And similar things, there are hints at similar things linguistically. So I guess my question is, can you envision ways where people could make use of peers, or where peers might do some of this active listening, or are there things that you could see them doing to help each other?
Well, there are things that friends always do for each other, and it isn't necessarily active listening, but it's very supportive. But in terms of the thing about either going too deep or not getting in at all, not getting in at all is pretty obvious. The getting in too deep and not coming up for air is a little less obvious. But I think people, if you get in too deep and don't come up for air, it's very hard. You may end up not being able to you're losing perspective. Losing perspective means you really can't process very much. You need some perspective to be able to do some metacognitive and other processing. So I guess that's why I need to come up for air, is to take some perspective. That doesn't mean you have to spend all your time, but programs like these immersion programs. I did one many years ago in Russia. It was, I think, in 1963 or thereabouts. So it was the Soviet Union, and very much so at that time. And we were supposed to go and speak nothing but Russian, though we were going as a group of Americans, and we had peer relationships too. And what I found worked for me was that I did spend a lot of time talking to Russians. I was enthusiastic about it, and I wanted it. But I also knew that I got fatigued, and I'd come back and spend some time with the Americans, speaking English. And then I'd be ready to go back and get some more. So part of it's a matter of pacing. Part of it's a matter of... A similar example was when I went over to Egypt in 1994 with about 2 weeks of 1 hour a day Egyptian Arabic, and I had a wonderful time. But I found that and people loved to talk to me. I had no problem finding conversation partners. People wanted, even the people in the hotel who were really trained in good English. They were delighted to help teach me. But I found that I'd get really fatigued. I couldn't do very much. I was going over there with 0+ Arabic, and I have a lot of learning strategies, but it's very, very tiring. So I know that I had to pull back. So simply pacing yourself, and that's, I think, my view on the issue of diving too deep and not coming up for air.
We have another question from abroad. The question is, if a student gets upset all the time that she's not meeting her high expectations in the classroom, how can you help her to relax more?
Well, there's an approach, and there's a school of psychiatry called cognitive behavioral psychology, where they actually ask people to start examining their assumptions. And you've probably got somebody, and remember, I'm not saying probably, not definitely. You've probably got somebody who's got some rather heavy assumptions about how perfect she has to be.
So could you give us some examples of assumptions that come to mind?
I can't make a mistake, because otherwise I'm a terrible person. If I have a fender bender, I'm an awful driver. If I don't get an A, I'm going to fail.
So how do you coach them out of that, or how do you?
How do you deal with perfectionist tendencies in your learning center?
Well, one of the things I try to do is get them to laugh at themselves. By kind of taking it to kind of a ridiculous extreme.
So do you walk them through some of these things and take it to the ridiculous extreme?
Sometimes. Or sometimes there are a lot of little techniques you can use for things like this. Another one is to have them be have them be a more relaxed self, and you be that harsh superego, that person, that list of that set of expectations, and get them to argue with it, and they get really into it, and they see how ridiculous it is because you're saying all those things that they say to themselves. And so there are a number of things you can do. There's a book with an absolutely dreadful title, but we've gotten some good techniques out of it. It's, I think, called the Feeling Good Book or something like that. And I can't remember the author's name. I'll have to send it to you if I can get it from a colleague who uses it a lot. I think the title makes me feel horrible, but the book has some good stuff in it. And so, yeah, you kind of I want to anything you can do to help them get perspective on how ridiculous they're being to themselves. Sometimes you can say, well, what if you were teaching? What if you were your teacher? What would you expect? If you were teaching so-and-so, who's maybe a good student but makes mistakes, how do you feel about their mistakes? How would you feel about their mistakes? Well, why should you be perfect? You know, it's hard to say because, again, without knowing specifics and context, but so I feel as if I'm sort of throwing a lot of generalities out. I do a lot better if I know the situation and can ask questions. So, a lot of it really is getting people to reframe their perfectionism.
You kind of have on the opposite end of that a question here. I have an overly confident student. He always thinks he's right and even questions his native teachers. How can I work with him to help him be more open to teacher feedback?
Now, what do you think is going on with a student like that? Let's get some opinions on that one. What do you think is likely to be going on? Yes.
You might actually be masking some anxiety.
Uh-huh.
You might deep down inside recognize I'm not so good at this. Before that arrogance.
So that person might be anxious. I would guess. Yeah, go ahead.
I have a student who's sort of like that. This is, middle school student. And I think that she has pretty much never failed at anything because she's smart enough to do well. Mm-hmm. And so she is kind of missing that perspective on the other end.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So if you've always done well and you've never had the experience of failure, you don't know. You can come across as kind of grandiose. So there are two possibilities. One of them is that she really doesn't doesn't know what expect to fail, or he. The other one might be that the person's anxious and they're trying to hide it from themselves and everybody else. Any other thoughts?
Maybe their level is better than the class.
You think maybe they really are better? Could be. And we don't know in this case whether that's true or not. My guess is it's very likely to be the anxiety thing. Somebody who's going around and not taking correction and saying I know better isn't facing. I mean, especially if they're getting correction, they're not perfect. They're not above the level. And so my guess is that they're protecting themselves against some kind of really serious assault to their self-esteem. And that's just, again, a guess. I put everything hypothetically because they are only guesses, especially without context. And some of these things get into psychotherapy. And none of the people that are going to be working with these students are psychotherapists. So you do the best you can, and you're not going to be able to do therapy in the classroom. You can't expect to deal with somebody's narcissism, which is very painful. It's actually a very painful condition because it does involve this trying to hide from yourself how inadequate you feel. But anyway, you can't deal with that as a teacher. Maybe you can help them get a little more perspective and feel a little safer, but don't expect more of yourself. Yeah.
When I read the chapter, I was so interested in reading about self-defense mechanism of the students they use in their classrooms, and I started to think what are my mechanism I use to defend myself in the class, and until now I'm thinking about. You remind me of regression, and sometimes I do this, and most of the things I do, like rationalization, the situation, but I wonder if there's, maybe I'm now unconscious for what.
By definition, defense mechanisms are unconscious.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and maybe I'm unconscious for what maybe I use, because I was unconscious when he talked about regression, and I said I don't use regression, and I just like realized myself that I'm using rationalization. So I wonder if do we use all these things as a teacher, or it happens, or it is just like few things that maybe teacher they use for defense themselves?
I'm going to make a generalization and to say that everybody has defense mechanisms. Everybody uses them. And so I don't believe that there's anybody who doesn't, as a teacher, use some form of defense mechanism or another, and it depends on the situation, and some of it depends on their character structure, which ones they're going to use. Mm-hmm. But I don't believe that there's anybody who doesn't use them. I don't think there's a human being who doesn't use them.
In the classroom?
Anywhere.
I use them, all of them mostly outside of the class. I believe in this,
Not offensive in the classroom.
I believe in this outside of the classroom, but I still now I'm unconscious,
Well, I'm going to hypothesize and say I think it's highly unlikely that you have highly unlikely that you have no defense mechanisms in the classroom.
Okay.
But you're going to need to think about them and maybe observe some of your behavior.
Okay.
Maybe even get a little feedback.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anything else? How are we doing on time?
We were planning to go for another 10 minutes.
Okay.
So if you've got questions here, please feel free to jump right in. Yeah, I got one here.
Okay.
You talked about like building relationships with students and stuff, but to what extent should you be their friend, and to what extent do you need to be the authority?
That's a very important question. It's about boundaries, and boundary management is really a key issue. Yes, you want to maintain a friendly professional relationship, but I've seen teachers get in a lot of trouble when they try to be students' friends, as opposed to people who like them and want to be helpful to them and enjoy each other's company as professionals. It's a professional relationship, and again, that's another of those similarities to psychotherapy. A good psychotherapy maintains professional boundaries. A good psychotherapist can be friendly and you can even feel good with each other, but they don't do things like go out together. They don't do things that may, particularly for a teacher, that may imply playing favorites. So they manage their boundaries pretty carefully. And so I think that's a really important question. I'm really glad you asked it. Have any of you had boundary dilemmas or anything of that sort? You and then you. Okay.
Yeah, there's a certain number of students who decide you're their best friend, and so they show up in your office just about every single day. This is especially true on study abroad. They're probably feeling anxious from the outside, and you're the one they go to. And pretty soon, other students, whether you feel that way or not, other students feel like that person is your favorite because they're always spending this time with you, and they've confided in you so many things that you know all sorts of stuff
Actually,
about.
who do you think you really are to those students?
Dad?
Yeah.
I don't know.
You sure are. Or Mom.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, that's what you're getting. And it's a phenomenon called transference, which means that you're taking relationships from your ancient history and applying them to current ones. And so, yeah, you're going to see a lot of transference in a classroom, both ways. Yeah. And actually, you had your hand up first, and then.
When I first started teaching here at BYU, I was really close. Well, I still am close in age to my graduate students, and so I felt like their peer, even though I kind of knew them, knew my position and wasn't. So I would have them call me by my first name.
Sure.
That was just kind of the way I operated as a graduate student teacher, and so I used that when I came here. But I didn't feel comfortable with it. I felt like students took advantage of me in the classroom. They didn't give me the respect that I felt like I should have, or that I needed to conduct the class effectively. So the next semester, I started asking them all to call me Dr. Martinson. as casual.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there is a kind of you did learn the need for the boundaries, and you started finding ways to manage them.
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe later on in my career it would be fine for them to call me Rob, but right now it's not effective.
Right. So when you're older, then some of those boundaries are already established.
Right.
For you. But at this point, you have to establish them.
Yeah.
How about you? You wanted to bring something? Sorry? Oh, okay.
Other questions?
A good example of the boundary issue. It's not easy. One of the most painful things for me when I became a department chair over at FSI was having such a different relationship with people that had been colleagues. It was moving to management wasn't comfortable.
So we have a couple of questions left here that haven't been asked, and just a couple of minutes. So one of them that I think a lot of people deal with is, how do you help students a student who is saying that their teacher is assigning so much homework that it's getting in the way of actual learning or learning the language?
This is something that is probably familiar to several people in the room. Again, I think I would want to make more inquiries. Why is what's going on with the student? What's going on with the teacher?
So it sounds to me like you don't want to have any pre-existing hypotheses in your mind. You want to just ask them lots of questions.
I'd like to stay open.
But based on your experience, you probably have some hypotheses or some things.
I really don't. I have possibilities. One of them may be that the teacher really is. Another one may be avoidance behavior on the student's part. One of them may be very poor learning strategies on the student's part. So there are a lot of things that you really want to investigate.
I'm sorry. Let's say it is poor learning strategies. What might you do to
There
help?
you go into starting to help people with this is the working hard versus working smart issue. If they're working hard but not smart, they're spending a lot of time not getting. They're generating a lot of heat and not much light. Okay. What you want to do is help them find more effective ways to learn. Usually, that's going to involve having them do more with investing in what they're learning. So they spend more time on less stuff, but they spend productive time. They use deep strategies. They use things like associations, elaboration, and there's a chapter in my book that has quite a lot of information about that. I think it's chapter 8 actually. But I think that's a really important issue is because a lot of people will spend a lot of time grinding away at surface strategies, but they won't go any deeper. So that if it's poor strategies, and it could be a combination of too much homework and poor strategies. You never know. That's why I say go into it with an open mind. You just don't know what you're going to find if you come in with too many preconceived ideas.
So I know there are some strategies in your book, but do you have like a list of top 10 strategies?
As a matter of fact, in this book there is a list that teachers at FSI have said they'd really like.
Okay.
And let's just find it. Taxonomy of areas. Let's see. That's not it. I'm trying to find the list. It's somewhere in chapter 8.
But by the way, Madeline's commented she's not wanting to get rich on her book or anything. It's a great book, I have to just tell you. I'm sure she makes about $0.05 a copy or something like that.
I didn't write it to get rich.
But it's a good book. I highly recommend it if you haven't looked at it.
I think it may be a table 8.1. That's certainly one of them.
Okay, maybe that's something we could post up on that.
And that is on page 185. I would guess that's the one that people like.
So any other closing questions for Madeline? We're about out of time. We have just another minute or two. Go ahead.
Okay. So we talked about not focusing on grades, but as a student, I know that when my teachers do that, I kind of just shut my ears because, to me, I really do need good grades because that's how I go to school through scholarship. So how do you, because I think it's not good to just blank this, they're not important, like, just focus on something, but because, like, to some people, like, it really...
I agree entirely, they are important. And you've got people with things that are going to impact their lives. You've got to take them into account. What you want to do, though, is have something in addition to that, so that more of the motivation may come from things that are going to have people investing more. If you're doing it just for a grade, you may not invest as much in your learning. You may invest in achieving tasks. But it's real life. People do have to get grades. They do have to maintain scholarships. They do have to get a certain score on a test to get a salary increase or whatever. So, no, I wouldn't say they're not important. I'd just look for ways to make other things important too. I'd acknowledge they're real, but I might even say directly to somebody, again, depending on my relationship with the person. You know, you're going to get more out. We want you to get your grade. I want you to get your A. I want you to get your 3. But I also think you're going to get more out of it. You're more likely to get your 3 if you also find some things that give you pleasure in this, so that you really want to put yourself into it. So I would say, I think there's some things that I think maybe the most important thing I've been trying to say here are a couple of important things. One of them is stay open. Don't walk into a situation thinking you know what's going on. Listen, see what's going on, try things out, stay hypothetical, even when you've got some more information. Don't sort of zero in on something and say, this is the answer, because it may not be. A lot of this is about diagnosis. A good doctor can't give you a good treatment unless they know what's going on. If they give you the wrong drug, you're going to be real sorry you went to that doctor. So it's while this isn't as life and death as medicine, it's still the same principle. If you're going to make an intervention, you want to make one that's targeted in the right direction. Another one is don't minimize feelings. Feelings play a huge role in learning, either constructively or destructively. They can also enhance cognition, as well as eating it. I like at FSI when I walk by doors of classrooms and I hear laughter coming out, because it usually means people are having fun and they're probably learning more. So, I guess those are probably the two biggest themes. Can you think of anything else that might be themes for what I've been saying?
That's great, and we really appreciate it. And we can continue. We actually do invite folks to share comments and so forth over the next. We said over the next 24 hours we would keep an open electronic discussion going for those of you who are not with us here. We wish you could be here, and look forward to future face-to-face meetings with y'all. But thank you for joining us, and thank you so much, Madeline.
Oh, it's been a great pleasure to me. I mean, and I really appreciate the fact that people were participating and helping make it go better. Because if there's anything I hate, it's just lecturing.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
So the trainees, we're going to hang around with Madeline here for a little while, and if anybody else wants to hang around, and you're more than welcome. Get up and stretch, right?
Yeah. I appreciate it. I think again, it's not every student.
I want to write more, but I was too intrigued. That was good.